flight is scheduled for July, I think, 20th. 2 weeks after Bezos officially steps down as Amazon CEO, I guess to help quell any shareholder concerns. Morgan, I give his brother credit. If it were my sibling, I don't know. I mean, that's a lot. I'm not saying because of who your siblings are. It's a big vote of confidence.
It's a big vote of confidence, and I think it's a big vote of confidence to see Jeff Bezos actually be on this inaugural crewed space flight as well. Really speaks to that safety element. I mean, this is the New Shepard vehicle, the suborbital rocket and capsule, has been past the edge of space and back. It's done 15 of these tests so far, but never with people on board. So certainly it is a huge moment in what is already shaping up to be a huge year just in terms of space tourism in general. We have this now, July 20th, which, as you mentioned, is the 52nd anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing, the first time we saw human feet on the moon. So that's the key to that date. And then, of course, later in the summer, likely Virgin Galactic with Richard Branson. And then in September, as soon as September, that SpaceX flight with Jared Isaacman and the Inspiration 4 all-civilian crewed flight around orbit for a couple of days around Earth.
And Deirdre, everybody's looking now to Elon Musk for some kind of response. And from what we can tell, he hasn't tweeted in almost 24 hours.
No, we've heard from Richard Branson, but we haven't heard from Elon Musk yet. We know that he's competitive with Jeff Bezos. But Kelly, one of the things I noticed about this is we now know what is behind Jeff Bezos's glow up a few years ago. You know what picture I'm talking about, that really muscular one.
To get ready for
training
space?
to become an astronaut.
I don't know. I think he might have had other motivations. Michael, what do you think?
I don't, Morgan will have to
Probably so.
answer that. I mean, that's got to fit into it, right?
Well, I think it certainly fits into the idea of a next act in general for Bezos after building a whatever $1.6 trillion company. It seems to be fine running its own on its own under a successor. And I agree that, I mean, just the idea. I'm trying to think of an analogy. If 100 years ago, some CEO of a huge company decided to take a cross-country flight in a plane when it was considered to be kind of a risky proposition, what it might have meant for aviation. So hard to really find fault with that element of sort of, going someplace that you basically are implicitly asking other people to go on the frontier here.
I'm probably going to completely get this wrong, Morgan, but I think like Teddy Roosevelt did a cross-country trip in cars or something to try to, again, kind of encourage people to go see the country and maybe trust this new method of transportation. And maybe I'm off by a few decades, but point being, is this technology ready for prime time? It seems like an obvious question to ask, but what has been the catalyst to make all of a sudden 4 weeks from now, basically, Jeff Bezos becomes the first person to achieve this, even before Branson, even before Musk?
Yeah, and I think the catalyst is those 15 successful test flights so far, and the fact that you're talking about technology that's been in development for, in the case of Blue Origin, I mean, that company was started in 2000. In the case of Virgin Galactic, you're talking about 2004. These are technologies, these are companies that have been developing this type of capability for quite a number of years now. And back in 2019, the expectation was that 2020 was going to be the year of human spaceflight. And it was, given that SpaceX, those 2 SpaceX missions for NASA, but in terms of the paying passengers to space and the space tourism stuff, because of COVID, that really pushed to this year, and it is poised to be a very busy summer. But this has all been decades in the making for these companies.
No, that's a great timeline. It's a great timeline. Thank you. All right, let's go from space to sidewalks now, where Amazon's Sidewalk project is set to launch across all Echo devices tomorrow. You need to know about this. Here's how it works. Customers will share a slice of their Wi-Fi bandwidth with the neighborhood, so everyone's home security and Bluetooth devices can stay connected in case anyone loses internet connection. Customers are automatically opted in, so you have to take steps to opt out if you're not interested. That's got some privacy critics up in arms, Deirdre. But does this, there's a Washington Post headline, Deirdre, that says Amazon is about to share your internet connection with neighbors. Is that accurate? I mean, is that really what's going on? Is it my actual Wi-Fi connection?
It is. It is a small part of your Wi-Fi connection to create this sort of mesh network. And we did question sort of the Amazon VP of devices on this, David Limp, a few weeks ago. And he said that all of the data is going to be anonymized. However, we know with big tech companies that sometimes is easier said than done, and some of these privacy controls as well. There was that couple, I don't know if you remember, a story that their voices were recorded, a conversation, a private one, and then sent to a coworker, and that was obviously, a crack in their privacy issues. But stuff like that can happen, so you might want to be careful. And it is fairly easy to opt out. My question, though, is why have everyone opt in when the privacy landscape is changing so much? But in order for this thing to work, you need to have a large percentage of neighborhoods of the population on Echo or Ring devices actually take part in this network.
Michael, security-wise, I absolutely see the appeal. Of course, you'd want, when you look back at your footage to be able to see someone down the street or, you name it. But I'm just curious if you think this is an ill-advised concept or launch or idea, just generally speaking.
I've kind of learned not to ask the question who was asking for this when it comes to technology, because almost all the things we now consider indispensable, nobody quite asked for specifically, and it just existed in the world, and maybe people bought into it, maybe they didn't, but then it started to seem normal. So perhaps that's what this is. It's some kind of improvised version of having a little bit of a local 5G kind of bubble around your neighborhood. I don't necessarily see the huge payoff to the upside. It's kind of minor conveniences you're getting along the way. But, if this is sort of the way it is, that your signal is kind of bleeding out into the world anyway. And this just kind of formalizes it, puts a little utility on it. We'll see. I think we're in an opt-out world. In other words, people just assume that their stuff's being shared unless you tell them otherwise.
Deirdre, quick last word on this.
Quick last word. I don't know. I guess it's with all of these devices, the more devices we have tracking our lives, listening to us, you have to weigh the benefits and the drawbacks. If you're comfortable sharing a lot of your information with Amazon, then this might be right for you. It certainly provides a lot of ease, a lot more coverage. Your lights won't go off. You might get more on your cameras. You might be able to find your keys or your dog because they're combining it with their trackers. So there are benefits. Maybe even your kids, Kelly. Maybe you could attach that and find them in the neighborhood.
Believe me,
after
this weekend, it's going to come to that. And I take your point. It's like, give me a quick last word on a major societal change that we're all going to be grappling with for a decade. It's like, sometimes it doesn't work that way. We're going to have to all figure out, how everybody reacts to having this new technology. All right, finally, millions of American workers have apparently forgotten about their 401k plans, leaving $1 trillion on the table. A new study from Capitalize finds $1.3 trillion, in fact, is sitting in more than 24 million unattended accounts. It's mostly a side effect of employees forgetting to roll over their balances or to carry over retirement plans when they switch jobs. Capitalize says forgetting 401ks could potentially cost you almost $700,000 in lifetime retirement savings. Morgan, I've actually done this. I've switched jobs and not left it forever. I mean, just for a period of time. And I had realized, oh my gosh, that money wasn't in the market at the time. It was just sitting in cash. And by the time, a couple of years had passed, it was like, how would you call it? The opportunity cost of that money was pretty high.
I actually had a similar experience, Kelly, but just, in general, isn't it incredible? Trillion with a T that we're talking about here. I think equally as incredible, and this sort of varies from state to state to state, is the longer that money sits unclaimed, at some point it ultimately makes its way to the state coffers as well, and just how important it is, especially in this day and age where you do have certain apps and certain services and companies that are even rolling out just to deal with this, how important it is to make sure that you're not leaving those funds on the table.
Absolutely. Michael, what did you think was most sort of striking or important about this?
The headline number is big. It's probably more than 1% of U.S. financial assets in total. But also, I wonder if they're just defining it as balances that people have not rolled over or done anything with. In other words, maybe people didn't literally forget about it. It's just that they haven't rolled them over and consolidated them. It would seem like there should be a better way. Your Social Security numbers on these accounts, maybe there's a way to notify you, hey, don't forget about this. But I also predict that if they study the performance of these accounts down the road, every single research project shows the less people look at their balances and the less people play with their accounts, the better they do longer term.
So they're trying to get people to forget. Deirdre, I was just going to say to Mike's point about rolling, it's such an archaic process to roll these things over. You're filling out these paper forms and you're mailing them, and it's so complicated and convoluted trying to figure it out in the first place. It's like, make it a little easier.
Kelly, I'm like you. I also, when I read this report, thought of my very first job at a gold miner and thought, what happened to that 401k? Where is it? And I've heard cases where it's invested back into the company stock. I just looked at the stock of that company, and I don't think I would have made anything, but I will still go and look into it.
Wait, you were a gold miner? Is that what everybody else heard?
I worked at a gold miner. Yes, unfortunately, tracks the gold price.
Yeah, exactly. Let that be a reminder to everybody who's investing in it right now. All right, we'll leave it there, everybody. Thank you very, very much.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.